Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking some seriously intricate historical claims by Dr. James Krauss. We're looking specifically at his fascinating 1921 introduction to the 6th edition of Samuel Hahnemann's Organon of Medicine. And let me tell you, this text makes a bold, passionate argument. It claims that Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy, wasn't just a historical figure, but a literal foundational pioneer of the scientific method in medicine itself.
To really get into this vintage text, we're going to navigate the pioneer's path across 5 distinct pillars. We've got scientific imagination, clinical verification, intellectual integrity, scientific parallels, and finally, his enduring legacy. Let's jump in.
Pillar number 1, scientific imagination and induction, the spark of an idea. This is the very first step of any breakthrough, how ideas are actually formed from keen observation.
Now, our source poses a pretty provocative question. Was Hahnemann in error, or maybe just premature with his conception of symptom similarity? Critics back then definitely argued that he jumped the gun. But Dr. Krauss demands we look a little closer at how scientific imagination actually works. He counters by saying, hey, true science doesn't just collect facts like a cataloger. You absolutely need the intellectual power to induce broader concepts from very specific, rigorous observation. To illustrate this, Krauss asks a great question. Was the ancient philosopher Pythagoras wrong because he deduced the Earth was round just by seeing a ship's mast appear on the horizon before the hull? Obviously not, right? It took nearly 2,000 years before Magellan actually sailed the globe to physically prove it, but Pythagoras' initial induction was spot on. According to Krauss, Hahnemann did exactly the same thing. He observed very real fever symptoms induced by a drug, and from that specific perception, his scientific imagination deduced the broader concept of symptom similarity. He synthesized a simple observation into a massive scientific induction. Moving on to Pillar 2, clinical verification, the crucible of practice. Once you have that hypothesis, you have to test it in the real world. And Hahnemann didn't just sit around theorizing. As Krauss puts it, he acted as his own Columbus and his own Magellan. Back in 1790, he did his famous experiment by taking large doses of china, or Peruvian bark, and watched as it caused paroxysms of chill and fever in his own healthy body. By 1797, he was out there actively verifying this concept in clinical practice, successfully prescribing remedies like Veratrum album for colic and Nux vomica for asthma. Then, by 1810, he formalized all these verified experiments into the very first edition of the Organon of Medicine. He didn't wait for future generations to sail his globe, you know? He proved his own inductions through decades of hands-on practice. What's really crucial here is that the text emphasizes his verifications were truly scientific because they were completely repeatable methodologies, and he actively passed them on. A scientific experiment isn't just some one-off miracle, it's a strict protocol. Hahnemann successfully treated his own patients using this precise method, and he explicitly taught other medical men to do exactly the same thing. That repeatability, that was his ultimate verification. Which brings us to Pillar 3, the demand for intellectual integrity, the rules of engagement. If you want to validate or invalidate these claims, you have to strictly adhere to the rules. Hahnemann's defenders get really passionate here. They argue that critics often completely lack intellectual integrity because they simply don't replicate his experiments exactly as they were outlined. Krauss pulls absolutely no punches. He says, quote, "Those that doubt this really do not doubt. They know not what they doubt." Basically, if you change the parameters of an experiment, you aren't testing the original hypothesis anymore, you're testing something else entirely. So Krauss insists there is only one scientifically valid way to test this. First, administer large doses of china to a healthy body. Second, meticulously observe the induced fever symptoms. Third, give smaller doses of that same substance to sick patients who are already suffering from similar fevers. And fourth, observe the curative powers. The argument here is that any other method, altering the dosage, the subject, the sequence, is literally unscientific. It completely fails to evaluate his specific methodology. To have true scientific conviction, you have to repeat the exact experimental verifications of the original observer. Okay, on to Pillar 4, parallels with scientific breaks. The validation. Our source draws some heavy-hitting historical comparisons to back up this demanding methodology. The text points out that Hahnemann's rigorous approach didn't happen in a vacuum. It directly parallels universally recognized scientific giants like Louis Pasteur. Think about it. Pasteur noticed that a mild case of cowpox prevented the much more severe smallpox, and used his scientific imagination to conceive the prophylactic treatment of infectious diseases, using milder vaccinations of the exciting virus. Pasteur's step-by-step verification with sheep is a perfect mirror for Hahnemann's own careful process. Pasteur didn't guess. He set up a strict contrast. He took a number of sheep, vaccinated some with a mild prophylactic dose of anthrax, left others unvaccinated, and then injected all of them with a larger, lethal dose. The result? The unvaccinated sheep died, and the vaccinated ones survived. Krauss argues that Pasteur, much like the elder Hahnemann, was executing flawless analytic deduction. Both men used precise, controlled experimentation to verify their inductions. By linking Hahnemann's methods to Pasteur's famous anthrax trials, the text squarely positions Hahnemann in the absolute top tier of scientific experimenters.
Finally, Pillar 5, the enduring legacy of scientific medicine. The final impact. Let's look at the ultimate conclusion his advocates draw from all this.
The text claims that for well over 100 years, Hahnemann's method of symptom similarity has been guiding the medical profession, whether they realize it or not. Remember, Krauss is writing this in 1921, looking back at a full century of history since the Organon was published. His advocates argue that the era of scientific medical experimentation didn't begin in some modern lab, but with Hahnemann himself, and that over a century of successful application proves his inductions have completely stood the test of time.
And all of this culminates in the concept of the Echte Heilweg, or the true healing path. His followers recognize the Organon of medicine not as some dusty historical relic, but as an enduring, active teaching text for symptom similarity in scientific experimentation. To its defenders, it is the definitive blueprint, the permanent legacy of the true healing path.
So as we wrap up this explainer, we're left to impartially ponder a really fascinating historical perspective. Dr. Krauss gives us this passionate defense of a methodology built on imagination, strict clinical verification, and serious intellectual integrity. And it leaves us with a compelling question. Whether we're talking about Hahnemann, Pasteur, or the researchers of tomorrow, how will the ongoing evolution of medical science continue to reflect, test, or even challenge the foundational experiments of our historical pioneers? Thanks for exploring this with me. Keep questioning and keep learning.